I have always experienced supernatural phenomena, even at a very young age. It didn't cross my mind to dig deeper into the subject until the occurrence of a culmination of a group of events in my early 30s. The main event was the realization that many relics that I had obtained over a 10-year period in entirely unrelated locations were connected or belonged to members of a group of World War I veterans who I determined most certainly knew each other. While I saved all of their things and often looked at them for enjoyment, it was not until 1993 that I realized the connection. Because this happened 30 years ago, I have lost track of some of the names. The story begins in 1983 in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where I had relocated from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to accept a job managing the rehabilitation of a large apartment complex there. Kenosha was 90 miles from Milwaukee. The complex was built on an old farm and orchard across from the University of Wisconsin Parkside. I immediately felt very much at home in my new location. At the rear of the property, there was a condemned farmhouse from the late 1800s, along with a barn. One day when my maintenance crew was cleaning out the barn, they found a Victorian-era photo album full of pictures from the mid to late 1800s, along with greeting cards from the same era. The connected piece of ephemera from this find is a greeting card from 1879 with the names of 6 family members, 4 of which had the last name Rummery. In 1987, after returning to Milwaukee, I found a stack of letters in a large trash pile that a soldier named John Clement wrote to his mother while stationed in Europe during World War I. He had recently passed away and his home was being cleared out. The home was about 4 city blocks from my current home. This find included 2 of Clement's diaries, newspaper clippings, a very old family history, and a handful of photos. I spent countless hours reading through his things, and I felt like he was with me. Furthermore, his energy had a very familiar feel. While most of the letters were addressed to the soldier's mother, there was one envelope in the group that was addressed to Carrie Rummery. Does that name sound familiar? I did not make the correlation between this envelope and the greeting card from the barn in Kenosha until much later. For the most part, this story is going to revolve around John Clement because he was the one common denominator. During the same year, my husband, who performed maintenance for a property management company on the east side of Milwaukee, came home one day with items he found while emptying an abandoned walk-in safe that was going to be converted to an office. This find included an antique projector, hickory shaft golf clubs, and a painting dated 1837. The tag on the golf bag had a military rank and name on it. Shortly thereafter, in 1988, my husband and I purchased our first home in Milwaukee from the daughter of an older man who had recently passed away. There was another less significant find of another World War I veteran's belongings that consisted of family photos and documents, including home photos of the visit to Milwaukee of Robert F. Kennedy shortly before he was assassinated. In November of 1993, my brother suggested that there may be a connection between all of the things I had found through the years, so I stayed up late one night and began to look through the relics to see what I could find. The first thing I found was that one of the names on the greeting card found in the barn in Kenosha, dated 1879, matched a single envelope addressed to Carrie Rummery in the grouping of soldiers' letters that I found years later in Milwaukee. I was able to refer to an obituary and cemetery records to determine that the woman on the greeting card was indeed the same person that John Clement had written to. This gave me the motivation to continue looking for connections. The next thing I realized is that all of the men, including the one I bought my home from, were all born around the same time, and then I quickly realized they may all have been in World War I. I called the daughter of the man who owned my home, and she told me that he was in World War I. Also, as it turned out, I was currently doing decorating work in a home once owned by a member of the 107th Engineers, whose name I found in the John Clement grouping. Coincidentally, this was all happening just before Veterans Day. The day before November 11th, I placed a call to the local VA and explained my story and provided the phone operator with the names. At this point, I had made connections with 5 veterans of World War I. She said I cannot tell you much about them because their records burned in a fire in 1972, but they were all members of the 32nd Division. I am pretty sure they knew each other because their service exit dates are all late in 1919, which means they were part of a small group of selected service persons who stayed in Europe after the armistice to participate in the March to the Rhine. At the same time, there was other psychic phenomena occurring in my life, so I opened my heart and my intuitive channels and embarked on an intense spiritual journey where it seemed my soul was getting me caught up for lost time. I learned to hone my intuitive skills and gifts. I was no longer going to ignore them. Up until this juncture in my life, I had persistent headaches because I was blocking out this part of myself. As I strengthened my connection, I began receiving downloads of information, much of which are contained in my books that I wrote in recent years. The journey continues to this day because it's an infinite journey. After the landslide of realizations, I contacted one of John Clement's brothers and gave him a substantial portion of the ephemera. Apparently, his brother had thrown it out without his knowledge. He was very thankful. And by the way, I also found out that John Clement lived around the corner from me when I was a child in the 1960s.